Hi plant living friends, today I'm here to talk to you about houseplants for a dorm or student housing. It's that time of year when we're thinking about going back to school, and it's always fun to have a plant in your apartment or dorm room. I have two categories we're going to look at. We're going to look at the very absolute easiest, foolproof almost plants, and then the next step up, which is a much broader category of options. First of all, it's really great to have a plant in your living space, be it a dorm, student housing, or shared apartment, because it adds to the feeling of the space. It makes it feel better, and there's a lot of science about how having a living plant in your living space can do all kinds of really great things. It can increase your concentration, it can clean your air. There's a lot of corollary evidence that plants can increase your quality of life just by having them in your living space. And of course, right now everybody wants a plant, so it's really fun to have one. So the first group of plants we're going to look at are going to be the absolute easiest plants. So we have, this is a pothos, this one's marble queen, and look at that beautiful foliage. A cactus. This one's a variegated one with no spines, which is really great. The ZZ plant, or of course the large group of plants that we call snake plants or Sansevieria. Now I chose all of these plants. They have slightly different water and light needs. I'll go over that in a second, but I chose these because these are the ones that if you go out of town for a long weekend and you haven't watered them for a week and you come back, they won't be dead. They might look thirsty, these two in particular, or even these two if you get really dry, but if you give them a drink, they will probably perk right up. They're also ones that can handle different light environments. Save the cactus, we'll talk about that specifically in a second, but most of these can handle being in any sort of different light environment. And that's one of the big unknowns about going into a dorm or student housing environment is what is the light in the living space and where will you be able to put your plant. These are the plants that can handle being in a lot of different locations. Pothos is a great group of plants because they have a draping habit. So when they're young, like this one, they kind of stand upright. But as they get bigger, they drape over the side of a pot and they look really beautiful. Cactus, they do need more light than the other three plants I've chosen here, but I picked it because they can handle not having very much water. So that means that if you can put this guy in front of a bright window and you only water it once a month, it's going to do fine for you. This is a great plant for a first-time plant owner. Actually, any of these are great plants for first-time plant owners. ZZ plants, I have seen ZZ plants in unbelievable light situations. And by unbelievable, I mean no light. ZZ plants, they just really keep on keeping on. They like to be in bright light, but they don't need to be in front of a window. And if you put them in less than bright light, they're going to do fine. They also don't need watered very often. I have a ZZ plant in my home that is in a 6-inch pot. So this is a 4-inch, 6 inch is going to be the next size up. But I only have watered that guy every 4 to 6 weeks for the past 6 months, and it's doing fine. It looks great, it's beautiful, and it's thriving. And lastly, but not in any way least, are the snake plants or Sansevieria. These plants are the most hardy of the 4 plants I'm talking about right now because they can handle going totally bone dry for weeks on end. They could survive in a closet and they'll just keep looking nice. If they're not getting the water or light they want, they're not going to grow, but they're also not going to die. So this is a great plant for a first-time plant owner or for somebody who has a really big course load. So this is my foolproof, you really have to try to kill these plants group. Next, let me show you the next step up. So these are the plants that will do fine in a dorm or shared living environment, but they need a little bit more care. So this is a group that is great for somebody who's already owned a single plant or for somebody who is a little bit more interested in caring for a plant. These are all still very, very easy plants. And if you do go home for a long weekend to do laundry or go on a trip for 3 days and you don't water these plants, they're all still going to be okay. They just need a little bit more care. So these are still great options for a dorm or student housing environment. So we have philodendrons, And so I've got up here, Philodendron Brasil. This one is very similar to Apothos, which I showed you earlier. And this one in particular could even go in that first group. I kept it over with this group because it's a philodendron. I'm showing you philodendrons here, but this one is actually even more easy to care for than some of the other philodendrons. That's a draper. It's beautiful. Philodendrons are really great houseplants because they are prized for thriving in the home environment. They are also adaptable to different light conditions. They have different habits. So this one is Philodendron micans, and you can see we have strapped it up to a pole because it's a draper or it's a climber, and it's just gotten really crazy in this size pot. So we needed to strap it up. You could also have it hanging over a planter and it would be beautiful. You can also, in this group, look at the plants that are kind of in the wandering dude group or inch plant group. I have 2 Tradescantia and 1 Calissia here. And I do have a video on how to care for Calissias. So if you're interested in this one, head on over to our page for specific care for this guy, but they all have very similar light and water needs. Peperomia are a great option for this group. We love Peperomia because they have a more thick leaf. They're kind of like a succulent, and the watering for a Peperomia is much more like a succulent than it is like a houseplant. So this one is a really great one for forgetful waterers. Fiddly fig. And of course, I'm showing you all of these plants in a smaller size. They will all grow to larger sizes. They all come in larger sizes. I'm showing smaller sizes because housing tends to be a little bit more compact for students. And so these are great for a windowsill or kind of in the small space that they are allotted. Or we have the Swiss cheese plants. I have a draping Swiss cheese vine, and I also have the beautiful Monstera deliciosa, and it's just starting to split leaves. Now, each of these groups have different water and light needs. Like I said, the philodendrons can handle being in bright but indirect light. And a lot of times, if you're in a student housing environment where you have a bright room, anywhere in that room, because it's such a small space, is going to be great for a philodendron or a houseplant, because bright indirect light tends to mean up to 6 feet away from a bright window, and sometimes dorms aren't much bigger than that. So these are great options. The wandering dude group, these are very easy care. They don't need to be watered particularly often, so you're looking at watering them when they're almost completely dry. And if you do let this group go bone dry, they'll drop some of their inner leaves, but the plant itself will not die. And so it might get a little bit bald on top if you forget to water it for 3 weeks, but it's going to keep going and it's going to look beautiful and continue to drape for you. Peperomia, like I mentioned, they have that thick succulent-like leaf, and so you can go quite a long time in between waterings with these guys. They come in some beautiful greens and blues and purples. They have some really fun leaf shapes, and they're just really easy to care for. Ficus, I have a video about ficus, so if you're interested in growing ficus in your dorm or student housing space, you can go to that video. But in general, care for a ficus, and any of them, not just the fiddly fig, is going to be bright but indirect light. These guys like to be closer to a window than, say, the philodendron do, but they can still be several feet away from a bright window, and they can dry out in between waterings. You don't want them to go bone dry for 2 weeks because they'll start to drop a few leaves, but the plant itself will keep going, so that's really great. This one's best if you water it and then let it dry out to about half the soil is dry. The top half is dry, but the bottom half is wet. Then go ahead and water it again. And then the Monsteras, the split leaf plants, these guys, very, very easy, and they just will get really big and beautiful, but they are really easy, similar care to that philodendron, bright indirect light up to 6 feet away from a very bright window. Water when the top half is dry, bottom half is wet, but if they do dry out, they'll show you. They'll droop a little bit, water them, and they should perk right back up. Well, there you have it. Some really great ideas for plants that will do well in a dorm or student housing environment. Thanks for watching. I always enjoy sharing these videos with you. Let me know what else you'd like to learn about. See you soon.